Welcome back for a new movie review and the very beginning of my retrospective. Welcome to the first review of the Power Rangers Retrospective. In the background, I chose music from the Sega Genesis Mighty Morphin Power Ranger the movie game. Because I don't want to worry as much about copyrights from using the actual movie music, so I chose the Mega Drive music. Hopefully you enjoy. With that said, first, here's a few pieces of info before I get to the actual review. Some basic info, and I'm going to do this for all the Power Ranger movies. First up, this film was released in 2,400 screens here in the US. It was released on June the 30th, 1995. It opened with a box office of $13.1 million opening weekend. Total domestically, it would end up grossing $38,187,000, and worldwide, it would end up doing $66,433,000. Not a huge box office overall, but the film wasn't super expensive to make either. I couldn't find definite estimates on how much was spent on the film, but most projections had the film cost somewhere between the range of $25 to $30 million to make the first Power Ranger film. It was also done by 20th Century Fox, as would the second film also be. Now, this film, the first Power Ranger movie, though it involved people from the show, it was not canon in the universe of the TV series, so keep that in mind also. It was rated PG. It stretched for 1 hour and 35 minutes or 95 minutes. It had a 40% on Metacritic among critics, a 5.2 out of 10 on IMDb. Rotten Tomatoes critic score was a 37%, and viewer score was a 56%. And that's it for some of the basic info. It was directed by the director with the name Brian Spencer, which I don't really know anything about his discography. But with that said, with the basic information out of the way, Power Rangers the movie. As I said, not canon with the TV series or anything. You have to keep that in mind. But with that said, the film would go on, definitely for many of us, was a big part of when we were young, so it has a nostalgia factor, which will affect my overall rating of the film from looking at it strictly specifically as a 90s like family film. With that said, it first starts out with like a opening similar to that of obviously Star Wars, and pretty much all the Power Ranger movies do this. It comes out with a crawl, like Star Wars talks about mythological being Ivan Ooze, of course, which ends up being the main antagonist of the film. But we see mention, and of course, the voice is done by the actress who plays in the film. Uh, I forget. Dang it. I just literally rewatched the film, but I always tend to forget the character's name she plays. But with that said, she guards, of course, the planet Phaedos. But first things first, we start out with a plane in the air, and the Rangers, along with Bulk and Skull, are getting ready to jump out of an airplane and go skydiving for a event to help save like the observatory in Angel Grove. So that's how it begins, and we get a cover song in the beginning, uh, done by Red Hot Chili Peppers, which at the time were one of the top bands of the 90s. Really, pretty much the entire decade of the 90s, Red Hot Chili Peppers were a big deal. I was never the biggest fan of Red Hot Chili Peppers. Personally, I never listened to their 80s stuff, so I don't know what it's like versus their 90s work. But still, I admit, I really like the cover. It's one of my personal favorite covers. Definitely one of my favorite covers of the 90s, hands down. But we get over the top extreme sports type stuff because in the 90s, extreme sports was everything. For those, if anyone who watches this grew up in the 2000s or 2010s, yeah, extreme sports was huge in the 90s, like BMX, of course, obviously skateboarding, thanks to Tony Hawk, and many other figures. For a time there, though, extreme sports with bicycles and stuff was like really huge. BMX and stuff like that was all enormous in the late 90s. Along with things like Surge, Mountain Dew, and many types of things that aren't healthy for you was big in the 90s. But we had that, we go on to the next part, and we get another song of a classic 70s song, Free Ride, which is actually one of my favorite 70s songs. But then we get here, and Bulk and Skull end up finally jumping out of the airplane, and they end up landing in this work site area, construction area for new building and stuff. And of course, also a person wanted to head over the construction work and stuff, ends up asking what they think they're doing. Then he gets pulled to look at something that is unearthed, discovered, and of course that being a mysterious egg with a metal hand over it. Obviously, that is going to be, obviously, Ivan Ooze. Then we later on see a more or less the same style Rita Repulsa we know from the show, and we get a more buff-like version, a much shinier design of Lord Zed. Personally, I like the movie design of Lord Zed a lot. I like the shiny metal aspect of it. I like he looks bulkier. He looks, in my opinion, more badass. But though it's really hard to get much better, Zed was always the best, pretty much main villain, in my opinion, at least in season 2 of the show. But we'll get to that when I get onto the retrospective on my Morphin series. With that said, I will say I'm kind of off a little, though, about the voice in the movie. But overall, I love the sort of redesign to go with. Though for it, it actually makes him feel a little bit more intimidating, in my opinion. Though he was already great. But we see, of course, Ivan Ooze, which goes for a little bit of a jokesy comedic tone, but with some also dark humor mixed in. So very different. He ends up also seeing teenagers and stuff, like he's talking to himself at first after they leave, and he's like, what's that smell? It smells like teenagers. Part of me always feels like maybe that was a reference to Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nirvana. I'm not sure if that's actually a Nirvana reference or not. I have no clue. But I've never been able to find anything directly whether or not that was a not so indirect reference to Nirvana. Hard to say. But given how huge Nirvana was and nice and everything, but also the fact you have a lot of pop culture references definitely in this film. That's for sure, which hell, unfortunately makes it also date, definitely from the time period with the references. Though for somebody who was the right age when the film came out, it hits for me still. I get the references, but if like kids or teenagers today watch the original Power Ranger film, I get the feeling that a lot of the references are going to go over their heads unless stayed up and are big into 90s pop culture. Hard to say though otherwise. But with that, we have, of course, he appears in the command center. Ivan destroys them. He does pop culture references. He says, like, the things I have missed. The Spanish Inquisition. The Black Plague, and the one I think that genuinely I get a good laugh out of even to this day, and that being the Brady Bunch reunion. I never cared much for Brady Bunch, but I was raised in a house that was definitely, I grew up though still with the show, even though I was never a fan of Brady Bunch. and I've seen Brady Bunch Reunion, so I get all those references. When I was younger, I didn't get the Black Plague or the Spanish Inquisition, which you learn when you get older more so, especially being big into history. But anyways, uh, he obviously destroys the command center, damages everything, and right at the end of a fight between his creatures and the Uzis, as I call them. But I never cared too much for the design of the Power Ranger costumes. I kind of like the more material, basic design of the Mighty Morphin show over the design of the costumes they went with in the film. Now, I will say I always have loved the ninjetti or the like ninja style costumes. I actually like those designs. I think they look awesome. But then they have to go, in order to save Zordon, they have to go for the great power. And when they go to obviously the other planet, they end up having to, unfortunately, first we have Ivan going back and says that he thinks he should be the one in charge, obviously. And kind of get why he ends up putting electric ooze on Rita's mouth so she can't speak. And Zed says, "Finally, someone shut her up." Which I always got a laugh out of that. But it makes sense given the series and everything. But then Zed tries to blast him and stuff, and Ivan is like, "Ooh, stop, that tickles. Now, my turn." And then he tells Goldar and a weird pig character which never exists in the show, is never mentioned in the show, which is kind of odd in my opinion. And they don't mention the side creature characters from the show in the movie. I'm not sure if they created him, the pig character, more for maybe younger kid audiences for slapstick comic relief. I'm not sure, but I could see that being the case. I am glad at least they kept the original voice actor of Goldar in the film. I do appreciate that. But they obviously go to another planet to try to save Zordon, where they come face to face with the Sea Witch or whatever, as Ivan called her, Dulcia, if I'm remembering correctly, that's her name. But she ends up saving from the Tengu warriors, which would become known as Tangas in the TV series, obviously. Now then, we have also Ivan using weird electric ooze to control the parents, to dig up his Morphicons, his creatures, if you will, his machines, and then tells the parents to leap to their doom. One thing also I will say I appreciate this film is the music. I do like the music. I like the instrumental scores. And when you're on the other planet of Phaedos, the music and some of the backgrounds really harken back for me to some very cheesy 80s films, which take place in the Star Wars universe. And I'm sure if some of you watch the older Lucasfilms, you know exactly what I'm referring to. The Ewok movies. I don't know why, but moments in the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger movie on Phaedos reminds me so much of the Moon of Endor. I don't know why, unless maybe they use some of the same filming locations. Now, we know Angel Grove filming and everything in the film was all done in Sydney, Australia, which makes sense. That explains a lot of the much things looking very differently from versus than traditional Angel Grove. Not surprised, there were different contributing factors as to why they chose to do the filming in Australia. But also we have a lot of other interesting stuff. The journey as we go. I always felt sorry for when Dulcia blows the mystical dust and gives them their ninja outfits. And goes to Adam, he's like, "I'm a frog." She says, "Yes, a frog to kiss," and stuff, and I was like, always, "Oh, come on, he got gypped." But That's just one of the gripes I had, at least when I was a kid, anyways. With that said, then we get later on back the Power Rangers return with their new swords, and boy, oh boy, the horrible CG Zords in the film. I get it, you wanted to use CG, but given the limited budget and everything, I'll be honest, I prefer the much more cheesy old style, like Godzilla type battles of the TV series versus the horrible CG. Because even though it looks bad in the show, I don't think it aged as bad as the CG Zords, in all honesty. But that's just me. Now, I will say some of the performances in the film aren't the greatest overall, but I do appreciate the actor who does play Ivanus, because you can tell he's really cheesing it up. He's given 110%. He's really enjoying this cheesy bad guy role. And I appreciate that. To me, that's one thing that makes a lot of movies from the 80s and 90s more memorable. The really cheesy stuff is when it's over-the-top performances. That's why I love Jim Carrey so much. That's why I ended up enjoying Sonic the movie this year so much, because the over-the-top performance by Jim Carrey. Over-the-top performances will help make a movie become what I call the so bad it's good category. Much like the Mortal Kombat movie, much like Batman and Robin in my opinion, or like the Street Fighter movie. Those are examples, in my opinion, of so bad it's good, and I would put Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie in that same category. Now, quickly wrap this up. Overall, if I was to base it strictly on a movie itself, by its own, I would probably give the film like a C- or a C. But with nostalgia factor involved, I give Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, I'm going to give it a B+. Some would be like, why not an A+ or something? Because there are still some things I feel that have not aged well in the film. And the bad CG and everything, though it is a film I definitely have a nostalgia factor for, there are still things like the CG and some other elements in the film. One being that that horrible pig character. I absolutely hate that character in the film, in all honesty, if I'm being upfront. But that's just my opinion. Leave a comment. Tell me what your opinion is on the Power Ranger. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. What is your overall thoughts? What would you grade it? As I said, B+ for me. What would you give it? I'm curious to see. And I hope you enjoy the upcoming Power Rangers Retrospective. And this is part 1 and the beginning. I will be reviewing Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, after Zeo, but before Turbo, because since it's actual canon with the show, I will be doing that, and then after I'm done with the regular series, the very last review I do will be the most recent Power Ranger film. So, this is how it begins, and then that 2017 will be where it ends. So with that said, I'll see everyone next time. Have a good 2021, everyone. Stay safe. And anyways, I'll see you all next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel. I'm uploading this on Christmas Day, so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone. Stay safe. See you next time.